my role here is really kind of just as a scribe, first and foremost. So what I will do is, like, as you talk, I'm gonna try to capture as much as what you say as I can in notes. And so we'll make a ton of notes, and I'll make connections between the notes. Feel free to ask me for a prompt or something.
Sure.
But for the most part, yeah, we're not trying to, like, solve any of this stuff. We're not really trying to analyze any of this stuff. It's very, like, free association. Some ways to begin, I suggest. One is if you have, like, a theme that you want to explore. One person wanted to explore their relationship to debt. So we could do that if you have something in mind there. Another way that we can go is more around, like, if there's a goal that you have or some desire that you have. And the example I always use is, let's say you want to make $1 million. I would write, I want to make $1 million. Mm-hmm. And that's basically like one part of you wants that, right? And you're you're planting the flag. You're allowing that part of you to say what it wants. And then, having said that, all your other parts will have their own reactions and things to say about that as well. And then another one is kind of just like, if there's any questions that are alive for you, or if there's just like something that you want to talk about right away, like an experience that you've had, just something on your mind, we can really start anywhere, and then it kind of goes where it'll go.
Okay, so with all that,
yeah.
As you were talking, I think I didn't have anything in mind, but I think that maybe what feels alive in my body right now is exploring, I would say, as a starting point, exploring my fear of losing money, or my fear of just poverty, destitution.
Yeah. Okay.
So I guess that's a good starting point, as good as any other. Fear of losing money.
So we got that there. I'll just make it a separate one as poverty and destitution. Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess let me know. I'll start riffing, I guess.
Yeah. So what about it? I share that fear.
Yeah. So it feels important to say that I have never experienced what I would consider to be true poverty. I have never been to bed hungry in my life. That's if you have that definition. Mm-hmm. It's funny because my mom a few weeks ago told me that when her and I lived by ourselves when she was a grad student, that she considered us as being poor. And I did, for example, would get free lunch at my elementary school. I qualified for free lunch. But number one, that never really bothered me. I actually kind of loved it. But number two, we still had a support system we could draw on if we ran out. I came from a wealthy family back home where we were, so yeah, I mean, we might have not had that much money then, but I knew we had resources to. Right? I mean, I assume maybe I was wrong about that, because I guess now it also feels relevant to say that same family that helped me grow up rich. I definitely have family members who have gone through really bad money troubles, but they're that typical story of people who go out of their way to keep up appearances. So they put themselves in even bigger holes so that they can still take trips, dress well. one particular, somebody took a trip all the way to the U.S. from where we were from to go to a U2 concert. And got into that about it. So, okay. But I am afraid when I make certain decisions, like when I took a year off, I was definitely afraid of losing all my money and putting myself in a desperate position. So I guess that's maybe part of that fear, an element, is being in a desperate position where you have to, where you don't have as much choice, and you have to do things that you don't believe in or that you just don't want to do. So to me, being poor equals there's at least one and probably a lot more than one person that has power over you and can take away your choices and your freedom. Let's see. So that's one part of it.
I feel you.
The other part, if I'm going to be honest, is that I told you that I grew up around people who. So it's funny, like on my dad's side, I got that story that you got of the rich are evil, blah blah blah. But on my mom's side of the family definitely idolizes money and status. If I'm speaking in general terms. So I think the other side of the other fear of losing money is, as much as I hate to admit this, is that I know that it will lower certain people's opinion of me.
To have money.
To not have money.
Oh, sorry.
If I lose money, I'm afraid of people. Yeah, just I guess they're just having a low opinion of me. I'll admit it. That used to be like my own family. I was afraid that they'd be whatever, ashamed of me, or be like, see, like they all look down on my dad. So I think it would almost be like, see, I knew you would your dad's genes and you fucking made you bad with money. This is interesting. It's not that I wouldn't be afraid I'm not afraid of them like looking at my bank account and seeing I have money. I'm more afraid of, say, them bumping into me doing a job that they feel is low status. Which I hate myself for even saying that, because I like to think of myself as someone who believes that all type of work is just as dignified. But it's one thing to believe that in your mind, and another, it doesn't quite feel that way to me yet. I've been socialized heavily into thinking that certain jobs, or I've been socialized into knowing that certain jobs are going to bring me the scorn of people more than others. And I've had jobs like that, and I've, in a sense, been proud of the fact that my family looks down on those jobs and that I have them anyway. But I still kind of, I think of like coworkers in my field now, and like what would they say if one day they hailed an Uber and I was the one driving it. And I don't know why I'm afraid of that, because it's silly. I shouldn't give a fuck, but I do.
All right, pause for a second.
Yep, sorry.
So I want to catch all of it. Yeah, okay.
one last thing about that is that I, it's definitely not just my family that I worry. I don't think I worry about people at large, but my spouse's family. I think a lot about the fact that they've never known me when I'm broke. And if we were to go through money troubles, would their opinion of me go down? Would they start seeing me as somebody who is burdening and saddling their daughter? So that's another fear around losing money.
That's real.
Can't think of much else in terms of why I consciously know I have this fear. But if you do me a solid and just kind of let me look at the tree so far.
Yeah, that's something I like to do, is just review, go back through it. So we started fear of losing money. You've never experienced poverty. Your mom had perceptions of you in the past, your both of your situation as being in poverty.
Can I stop you there just for a sec?
Yeah.
I don't know if this is relevant, but something that's amusing to me is that my grandfather
on which side?
On my mom's side. So my mom's dad, he used to tell me that we were poor. But we were most definitely not. We were rich. But I kind of thought that we were poor, but maybe in a weird way, I didn't feel ashamed of it, because I was like, okay, we're poor compared to rich people, but being poor ain't that bad. Because we actually did live in a really nice house and had cable TV and all that. So, but I wonder why. I don't know. He died when I was 8, so I don't know. I would be interested to ask why he wanted to tell me that. I don't know if he felt poor. I don't think so. And maybe it was some sort of work ethic shit.
Yeah. So,
okay.
When he was telling you that, at the time you didn't know whether that was true. So you weren't.
I was like 6 years old.
Yeah. So you weren't like, oh, but actually we're rich, Grandpa.
No. This is looking back.
Yeah.
I can't tell you exactly when I realized that we were rich, but yeah, we were rich. We grew up wealthy on that side of the family for sure.
Yeah.
And
that's an intense message, though.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? That is intense. And I know that he wasn't exactly a rags to riches story, because his family was rich as well, and I know I have distant cousins who have been presidents of our country and stuff. But I know that he went through periods of poverty, because his family would cut him off every now and then, and he had kind of relationship issues with his family, and he was just a very strong-willed guy, which is why everybody kind of respected him. So I know that at least temporarily he had to quote unquote slum it out. So I don't know, maybe that stayed with him. I really don't know. He was definitely not afraid of debt or anything like that. I found that about him later. And he was the type of person who would look down somewhat viciously on people who were actually poor. Including my dad. My dad was more middle class, not even poor. My dad was not poor, but I'm from a very classist society, and my grandfather was definitely of that ilk. Good guy in other ways, so shout out to him. But he was definitely of that ilk. So that makes it even more interesting now that we're talking that he would tell me that we were poor.
Yeah.
And I don't know if he was just maybe he was just fucking around. I really don't know. He didn't say it as a grave thing.
Huh.
He would say it very casually.
Huh.
Maybe it was just so I wouldn't ask for shit. You know? Maybe it was that simple. Like he didn't want me asking for all these Christmas gifts or whatever. But he definitely told us, you know, so I don't remember a time in my life ever in which I did not think of money as scarce. You know how some people say that?
So you always felt that it was.
Yes. Yeah. I do not remember ever feeling like, oh, money abundance. Mm-hmm. If anything, this past year is the first time I've had pockets of that type of thinking.
Huh.
This past year where I've made no paycheck. You know? But, I mean, also...
That's wild.
But also, I mean, I think that's also on the back of... I had the savings to take a year off, so in that sense I was like, oh, yeah. But anyway, so before this year, and certainly not until I started working, so through college at the very least, I could confidently say I had zero thoughts of money as abundance. As abundant. Tell me if I'm going too fast or switching the subject too much, but to the extent that I have this very vivid memory of my mom bought me a suit my freshman year of college, and at the Men's Warehouse, and I remember the suit I picked out costing like $500 or something, and I remember I remember crying on the drive home. I was overwhelmed by the fact that we had just spent $500 on a suit. Almost like, well, that she had spent that money. And again, we were not poor. Yeah. So it's not like it was setting the family back or anything, but I just felt like it was a frivolous purchase that she had spent on me, and I felt like I wasn't, not enough, that I didn't deserve it or something. It felt, interesting. I can't quite remember, but maybe it felt irresponsible, or it just felt like, I don't know. In summary, I was not comfortable. I was made very uncomfortable that day by the fact that she had spent so much money on me at once.
That sounds like a really impact. Like maybe it wasn't even like a one-time thing, but that's just like a emblematic experience.
Sure. It's funny because she gifted me a really nice computer for my high school graduation, so I could take to college. And which cost way more than the suit. But I did not. I was very thankful, but I didn't. I was affected by the suit. It's very weird. Maybe, well, okay. Checking in. There's something about clothes. I've never been somebody who dresses that well or who prioritizes clothing, nice clothing. So there was something about that. Maybe the fact that it was a piece of clothing that felt extra frivolous to me. And I knew it was somewhat of an investment. Like, I would need a suit to interview for jobs and stuff. But still, it felt like this massive indulgence that I was not worthy of. Yeah.
I relate to this. The experience.
And she was cool.
Money
She was not holding it over my head. I think she was surprised that I felt that way, or like taken aback. But,
did you like express? Well, you were crying.
Yeah, I can't remember if I verbalized any of this to her or not, but she definitely at least saw me cry about it. Yeah. I've never been very good at hiding my emotions like that. I can't remember. It was a long time ago, but I'm sure I must have said something to the effect of like, oh, it's so much money, or I don't know if I don't think I would have said the words, I don't think I'm worth this. I don't think I would have said that, but maybe something like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Just, it probably would have said something like, this is just a lot of money to spend on something like this on me.
Yeah.
This is making me think of the fact that on my mom's side of the family especially, so the rich side, not the poor side or the whatever, I did grow up with messages that asking for things was not okay or not ideal. That when you were asking for something, you were putting a burden on someone else. And I have explored this in therapy before, so that's not a new insight. But I grew up with those messages, so to me, maybe asking for a suit and have it be a $500 suit on top of it was maybe like just a huge violation of those messages. Maybe that was a big part of it too. But yeah, I've been trying to get comfortable actually asking. I've been intentionally trying to ask for favors at least once a day from people, or ask people for shit, because that's how uncomfortable I am with the concept of asking for a favor or owing something like that. Yeah. All right, you mind? Can we get a little lay of the land here?
Yeah. Look at that.
Yeah.
So, starting out with fear of poverty.
Yeah.
Two very different points of view about money on each side of the family.
Correct. I think so.
This experience is really a big one.
That's a big one.
Hearing that you're poor from your grandpa.
Yep.
And then I guess, not that you knew it at the time, but then like in retrospect, also realizing like in some objective way that this seems not true at all.
Yeah. We went to Disney World. You know what I mean? Like we were not. I remember the first time I flew not first class. Because like my grandpa died, and then the family fell into legit harder times. Not that we were ever destitute, but let's say we slipped down to middle class, or upper middle, or whatever. Not middle class. So I didn't even know the concept of first class versus coach.
Yeah.
I just know that one flight they didn't bring cereal, and I was like to my mom, like, "What's up? Like, are they not doing the cereal?" I was like looking forward to having cereal.
Yeah.
And she was just like, "Oh no, that's first class. We're not flying." I was like, "What? I thought you just got cereal on your flights, whatever you like." But even then, it's funny though. Even then though, like I didn't think of things as like, hey, we are of a certain class and now we're not. Maybe that's around the time that it started, but I just thought that what I enjoyed, cable TV, cereal on a flight, I just thought that was like normal.
Yeah.
I knew that there were kids who were poor who couldn't afford that stuff. Because again, where I'm from, where I grew up, poverty does kind of hit you in the face as soon as you step outside. So I do remember being in the car with my mom, and then kids my age would come and beg at the window. And I'm sure I asked my mom, like, hey, what's up with them? And then so I knew that there were people who were poor and that there were people who were rich. And I knew we weren't as poor as the kids who had to beg my mom for money. Right?
Yeah.
But I thought probably that we were like, maybe the next step or something like that. And I pictured rich people as being like presidents, kings. I used to watch Richie Rich, the cartoon. So like, people who had like Michael Jackson, whatever. People who had theme parks in their house and shit like that. So, obscenely wealthy people. So, of course, we weren't that. I thought that our house was just kind of normal and compared, But yeah, looking back on it, I mean, no, we had opportunities that 95% of the country I grew up with would never even dream about.
Yeah.
Hey, if you want to... I mean, looking at this map, my chest is having like an adrenaline rush looking at the other people have choices over you or power over you, but I don't really know what further to say about that aside from, I mean, that's kind of a big part of Big Quit Energy. Is like I really, really resent the power that bosses have over employees. And I think that is, I can probably point to when I started thinking about that, and it was my first job in high school at a restaurant. I was a busser. And a couple things to that. First of all, it was just a big bursting of the bubble moments. I don't think I realized how shitty those jobs could be and how badly the bosses treated the employees and took advantage of them. And how shitty the customers were to the... That's a very American thing. Just disdain for wait staff, disdain for retail workers in certain jobs like that, right? And feeling empowered to just tee off on somebody. I forgot where I was going to. Oh, but so another vivid memory was from that job was that I had told I was in high school, so I had told him like, hey, I have other things I need to do. I'm playing summer league basketball and whatever, and so I will let you know in advance when I have games and stuff, so that you don't schedule it. And I remember one time after I had been giving them unavailability dates, I thought far in advance. One day I show up and they didn't give me any hours, right, for the next week or whatever. I probably shouldn't use her real name, so I won't. But like I'll go, so hey, boss lady, manager lady, curious about that choice. And she said, well, you've been asking for so much time off. I wanted you to take a week to reflect about whether you really want to be part of the team or not. and that pissed me off. And I went home and I wrote like this, like probably. I should try to find that letter, but I wrote, well, it was probably an obnoxious letter. But I thought measured, whatever. It was just a very self-righteous letter, but it was basically saying like, hey, when I took this job, I told you that this would be part of what was going to happen, and you hired me, and I feel like I've been very blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I mean, I don't think I changed my behavior, and they gave me hours later, but that felt like her trying to play this kind of power play on me, right? And I had seen her play that power play on others who were not in high school, who had families that they needed to feed, and those people had to just take it. And I was so thankful that I was in high school and that I didn't need this job, and that my mom, I was working this job so I could have money to go hang out with my friends.
Yeah.
I didn't need the money, right? And that was probably the first time that I became very afraid of being an adult. Of like, I knew there was going to come a day when I would probably need a job more than I did now. And part of the lessons I drew that summer was, don't end up working at a restaurant. Your life is going to suck. People will take advantage of you. I have friends who work at restaurants now and are perfectly happy. Or whatever, not any less happy than... let's see, where were we?
That's huge.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, that is huge. I can go on and on about things. So feel empowered to stop me so you can... there was something else. There's something else about that. 1 sec.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I quit that job kind of suddenly, and I quit a lot of jobs in high school, and I thought it was hilarious. And I miss just being able to walk out on a job.
Yeah.
But I think, in a sense, I was exercising that freedom, knowing full well that one day the party was going to end, and that I was going to have to tolerate and get used to somebody dictating my life for me like that, and helping themselves to my time and to my choices and my freedom. And of course, being poor, to me, I picture being poor as a situation where you can't be very picky about the type of dictator you're gonna be under. If having a job is being under the dictatorial powers of a boss, having money buys you time to shop around for a dictator that's more benevolent. So I guess maybe part of the fear of poverty here is just low dignity situations. Can you go back up to the long screed about the boss? I feel like there was something else that had come up, but I didn't. No, I mean, I think that's the extent of that memory. But yeah, that particular job. So I didn't really think much about working or power at work before that summer. I guess I had this naive idea that everybody was more or less equally happy or unhappy in their job, no matter what you did for a living. And that summer, the bubble was burst. And it was my first true exposure to, I would just say, desperation. To seeing how desperate people's circumstances could be. And because I got paid so shitty, honestly, and I got ripped off a lot by my bosses in terms of tipping out, and ripped off by waiters. I would do this thought exercise of like, man, what if like I had to live on this? So that, you know.
At the time.
Yeah.
You were doing that.
Yeah. I think so. Yeah. Maybe not even the fact of, but like, you know, I wanted to buy a car, my own car. Like it was my first taste of life is expensive and and the pay is very shitty with these jobs.
Yeah.
They don't pay you well enough to be able to have optionality. Okay, so that, I mean, I guess you could even summarize all this as part of my fear of poverty is that I would end up at a job like that.
Yeah.
That I would end up at my high school job again with this particular manager just taking advantage of me, making me do shit I don't want to do.
Yeah.
That job was fucking crazy. Some of the things, you know, I don't know. It's just a crazy job. Let's see. Let's go back.
That's a huge one. Can I just point out about like what
please.
we said before? I guess it was during the interview about like the like systems part of internal family systems, right? And how like you find these core experiences or these knots that are like so emotionally loaded that you're all the other parts of you are doing like everything they can to avoid ever like experiencing that shitty feeling.
Yes.
This strikes me as one of them, you know. It's like you went through this thing and like you're like fucking ever being in that level of lack of power and at the behest of these people who might take advantage of me.
And also because that summer also just sucked, in the sense that like this job was like at night, so I was never going to go out to get at night. I was tired during the day, so I felt very isolated from my friends. I don't know if I really hung out with my friends also.
Yeah, that's huge too.
So I think actually that does add another element of. I also think of poverty as making it harder to participate in social life, regardless of whether people look down on you or not. One thing I love about having money, or when I do have money, I love that I'm able to be spontaneous. Or, more precisely, I am able to go along with other people's spontaneity. So, it's one thing to be on a date or whatever, or out with a group of friends, and they're like, hey, like, that, I gotta come up with something. You come upon a fair, I don't know.
Yeah.
Hey, that looks fun.
Yeah.
Let's hop on, and to be able to just say like, yeah, let's do it. Not ask about the price, not worry about it. Know that you'll be okay. It's not going to set you back.
Yeah.
It's a very different experience than, oh, well, how much is it going to cost? And you kind of start to feel like you're dragging everybody down. when you're the person who's looking at the cost.
Yeah.
Or asking about the cost, right? And the older you get, the more closed-minded people are about that. So in high school, we could go to the local restaurant and I'd be like, well, I'm not fucking eating. You guys want to eat here? I'll be here to hang out, but I'm just going to eat croutons. Which was something literally that I would do.
This is in high school, you said?
Yep. And no one gave a shit. They made fun of me for it, but I didn't, we all thought it was funny, and everybody knew. We're high schoolers. You do that as a 30-something. I think people are less forgiving about that.
And just to clarify, like, you would say that because you're like, this is too expensive for me.
Either that, I just didn't feel like spending the money on it.
Yeah.
I'm sure there were times where I had no savings, so there was. But even times when I had the savings, I'd be like, my mom already made dinner at the house. I already ate. Like, why am I going to spend money on this food?
Yeah.
I'm not.
Yeah.
And if I saw it as like our town had a lack of options anyway for where to hang out, and like even if it did, something that grinds my gears about social life, especially in the U.S., is how quickly people default to just let's go to a restaurant.
Yeah.
And spend. Restaurants are expensive. Yeah. I don't care what restaurant. They're usually expensive, way more expensive than eating at home. So that shit adds up. Like socializing adds up if you're just going to restaurants. And this year, since I was not working, I tried to be very upfront, or I tried to get ahead of that by saying if people want to hang out, I'd be like, hey, just so you know, I'm not eating in restaurants.
Yeah.
We can meet at a park, and I'll bring some coffee, and you bring some shit, or bring food from home. But I'm not, and I was pleasantly surprised. Most people seem to roll with it.
Yeah.
I'm also older and more secure now, and I'm married, and I don't. If somebody has a problem with that, I don't mind not being friends. It's just the loss isn't as acute.
I remember you making those kind of comments. Yeah.
In high school or in college or whatever, or early adulthood, early working life, if you're trying to find somebody to date, if you're trying to make your friends and stuff, it does, I think, I'd be much less likely to. But in life, everything is, I do think that the secret to life is just being able to own your circumstances and, like, turn them into a positive. And I have friends who were very cheap, but were very charming about it. But it's funny. I'm thinking of that one friend, and he now would be embarrassed for us to all stay in the same hotel room together, which I find disappointing because I'm just like, who gives a fuck? Honestly, who cares? So I don't know. It's just fun. He's in a different part of his money journey, I guess. But yes, I am afraid, and to a certain degree, of just not being looked down upon, but just being able to participate less with people around me and being a little bit more of that buzzkill, or like, even now during this year off, family members being like, hey, we're gonna take the little kid we're gonna take the little kid to Disney on Ice or X, Y, and Z. And it's not super painful to me to say, yeah, well, you guys have fun, I'm not going. But, I guess I could see if I had to do that all the time and just not participate, that's a little sad. That, I think. If I was never able to do anything that people wanted to do because I couldn't afford it. This makes me think of weddings. Weddings are very fraught with that.
Yeah.
Even when you have
example.
a paycheck coming.
Yeah.
Even when you do have a paycheck.
Yeah.
you get invited to 5-6 weddings in a year.
Yeah.
You're screwed. You gotta like think about, and there are certain people who you cannot say no to.
Yeah.
Because it would end your friendship, and you don't want to end that friendship. So, that's an example. Like on a year that I don't have a job, thankfully this year when no one invited me to a wedding, because if someone had, I would have been mortified.
Yeah.
I would have maybe gone into debt to go, which is nuts. So that's one big example.
Yeah.
And I'm not the first. I've had people talk to me about that or complain, quote unquote complain of, or just express how they feel really bad because they've been invited to weddings by their friends and they are too broke to go, and the friends get offended or this and that, or they offer to help pay for it. But again, you just kind of start to feel like you're draining away from the fun,
Yeah. Yeah.
And I blame, not to get too far skewed here, but
this is not a skew. This is.
I blame the media. But so many movies, especially around the time that I was growing up, I don't know what these days, I'm sure it's similar, but so many movies and shows and shit were like showing, like the Sex and the Cities of the world. They just made all those kind of all the Vince Vaughn comedies, things like that. In Swingers, they were all broke, but in other, like, Wedding Crashers, I don't know, a lot of movies like that.
Yeah.
Or even shows like Friends. Friends is the worst offender, actually, in that they just kind of put it out there face value that like these people are successful to some degree or another, and everybody can afford. So we're gonna have this episode where the hijinks is like hijinks at the golf country club. Maybe that's a bad example, but no one ever. Everybody can just afford to go.
Yeah.
That's never really called into question in a lot of these movies or shows, right? It's normalized that you can participate in certain things that in real life you're like, damn, that costs a lot of money. I can't just fucking waltz it,
Yeah.
Economic hardship. It's funny to think about this, but economic hardship is it's not depicted that often. Or maybe it is, but it's not depicted in, say, like Feel Good Buddy comedy. The Hangover series. Look, very funny movies. I enjoyed them a lot. But I mean, it's table stakes that they all can go to Vegas right? And all this shit, and the wedding's gonna be beautiful and whatever. And the one character who probably couldn't afford it, I forgot his name, the Greek actor guy. I forgot his name. But everybody knows who I'm talking about. Who's seen the movie? He's the loser who somebody probably paid for his ticket, but then that's kind of like that becomes part of his character trait. He's the one guy who's here kind of as a ride along. And not coincidentally, he is the least well-adjusted character. He's the most character deficient character in the story, and the loser. I don't even know how I'm, sugarcoating it.
And is it like almost like they like a loser in a comedic way?
Oh, definitely. Bumbling. He's the bumbling moron, idiot. I mean, it's a comedy, so they're all to a certain extent like that, but not Bradley Cooper ain't. Bradley Cooper is less slick. Right. And I don't know in that movie what he does for a living or something. He makes a lot of money, or if he doesn't, or if they don't address it, it's not. It doesn't. Anyway.
Yeah.
So I know we went kind of like down this whole thing, but when in real life, say for example, I go on trips with my friends, and I do assume everybody's holding The Hangover as like the ideal. Everybody wants to have memories and epicness. and that is a source of stress for me because I'm kind of like I personally don't care if this trip lives up to the hangover or approximates it at all. But if my friends want to like experience it or go to the casino and blow a ton of money, suddenly I'm a hindrance to that, or I'm not fully participating because I don't have money to blow at the casino, or even if I do, I don't want to blow money at the casino. A very extreme example, but
Sure. Yeah.
So I think that's a third element that I did not bring up in the beginning. If you have power discrepancies or being in a situation when you don't have power or others have power over you, the disdain of other people, not being liked or whatever. And then the third, I think, is the disdain aside, not being able to participate socially fully with the people around you, assuming that they all have more money than you.
Yeah, so these are like three of the big, what would you say, like the
reasons or drivers behind the fear.
Yeah. Yes. Those all make a lot of fucking sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that I started with this theme because it felt alive. I don't know. I don't necessarily have a goal to get rid of the fear of poverty, but
yeah.
I think that what I would want to change maybe about myself longer term is that I think I overblow these fears, right? These fears are not based, they're based in reality. These are all very real things that happen to people who are poor. But I think I overblow the likelihood that it's going to happen, and I think I overblow how severe all of these things are going to be. For sure.
And that's something that you would like to change, so you're not.
I think so, because if I were to attach this whole thing, it would be I would like to take more risks with money, and I would like to take more risks with not having money or having an income, right? And I took a year off this year, so I'm very proud of that. That was a big step.
Yeah.
But I think that I definitely play less in my life and experiment less in my life because I'm worried about losing all my money or being poor. And I think of these worst case scenarios.
Yeah.
And I mean, as an aside, I think something that has been pleasant about this year off is that, you know, the disdain and I did not experience these things that much. Of course, it's different because I knew it was going to be a temporary thing. So no one was. I did not let myself get to a point where I needed money so desperately that someone would have power over me. No, I didn't have to face people's disdain because I had the story to tell them that I was like, it's a sabbatical. I'm still, you know, I'm just not making money right now, but I'm not. I could if I wanted, right? So the only facet I was in danger really of experiencing was that third one of not full participation, and then maybe people being like, "You're a little bit of a drag this year because you're not willing to spend money." So for that one, at least, I think I am pleasantly surprised at how much fun I was still able to have with friends and not spend that much money doing so. You know, shout out to the park district and to like all the awesome amenities there are, but also shout out to people's willing to go with it and generosity. And you're one example of like he took me to a museum with your free pass, and like you know, so that's been a pleasant discovery of people are definitely willing and happy to accommodate your lack of money and have fun with you in different ways, and or pay for your shit.
Yeah.
Which I don't love that part. I don't love that, but I guess I was kind of willing to accept it, knowing that I could pay them back or treat them to something once I started working again. It's 4 o'clock, just so you know. So cool. You're about if you got to be there at 4:45. You're about 15 minutes away here.
Yeah. So let's go like another 15. So
sure.
We can also sort of take a new track now, where we just sort of like look at this more comprehensively or something. Reflect on.
Let's do that.
What you I love doing this, dude. Like zooming it out.
I love. There's something fun about seeing its physical manifestation.
Yeah.
Seeing it literally mapped out, right?
Yeah.
And even though, like, I know that in that big blurb of text, it's big because I was blabbing on about it. But also, I do enjoy that to a certain degree. The wall of text also represents how fraught that memory is.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, let's look at it holistically. I don't know. I mean,
I'll bold this one just to remember. Like that was literally the very first.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I have a lot of feelings happening. Physical more than anything, but I don't know if I have much else to add. I don't know if there's something that you like to do to help people wrap up or whatever, but I mean, I could look at this a little bit more and just kind of riff on anything else that comes up, but
I mean, something that I'm always curious to hear is like, you know, as I said, this is not about solving any of this stuff. It's really about laying it all out in front of you, as you said.
Yeah.
I'm curious if there's been anything that like surprised you, or like any distinctions that you've realized that you didn't realize before, or like maybe connections between experiences and thoughts and feelings, or maybe contradictions or something.
Yeah.
Anything like that I'm curious about.
Sure. As with a lot of therapy, it's funny because I never feel like I said anything I didn't already know. But at the same time, it's certainly having it mapped out in these three branches. I don't know what effect it's going to have, but I know it's going to have some sort of effect. Even though, again, I think I would have, had you told me these drivers before, I would have said, yeah, that rings true, but the mapping it out, maybe it's knowing that there's kind of these three discrete fears is going to maybe help in the future interrogate one each. This is funny, but I think the most surprising or novel thing I've had in talking this out is in the whole my grandfather telling us we were poor. I, funny enough, had never really asked myself why he would do that.
Yeah.
And now I'm very curious. And I don't think I'm not sure I'll ever get the answer because he's long dead.
Yeah.
But maybe I could ask my mom her theories on it or something. But it's a funny. I mean, I think it hints at his relationship with money. And so now I'm very curious. And you had been talking in the interview about, there's people who are good with money and I want their respect or whatever. Not, you didn't say it in those words, not to put words, but I want to prove to them or whatever. And my grandfather is that person in my life. When you tell me businessman, person who knows how to handle finances, who knows how the real world works, I would have said my grandfather. And actually, I mean, recently in the last few years, I've kind of realized how fallible that image was and how he was maybe not the greatest business person, but he definitely put that image out. And I do think he had some sort of core capabilities for sure that, for example, my dad does not have when it comes to that, right? But why did he tell me that we were poor?
Yeah, that's
it's
fascinating.
an interesting question, right? But I don't think it was just him, because it's not like my grandma was going around saying we were rich. Nobody in my family ever referred to us as rich in front of me, at least. So, and I do think that everybody in both sides of my family, but certainly on my mom's side, everybody treats money from a scarce point of view. That I'm pretty confident in asserting.
Yeah. Interestingly,
the
side of the family with a lot more money.
Yes.
Yeah.
I know on my dad's side that they don't have as much money. They're pretty money. But so for example, like I'm always very amazed when I meet people, especially Americans. I think are like this a lot, or a lot of Americans are like this, or you're more likely to find people like this in America, where just being like, yeah, I'm gonna take this huge debt to start a business, or the comfort with that is like not something. It's something very foreign to me, and I think foreign with my if my family does take on debt to keep up appearances, but they don't tell you that they're in debt, right? They're not gonna. I think I am also, maybe, I don't know if Bezos is like this or whoever, but there are business people who are like, I lost all this money on a bad investment, ho hum. And then they move on with life. It doesn't seem to really affect them psychologically. Like, they don't seem to get psychic pain from it. Nobody in my family is like that. Not that, I mean, not as far as I can tell.
Or losing money would be devastating.
Yeah. Not just, even if it's not devastating to them economically, like, I think they, and people in my family are cheap as well. So, even borrowing, like, again, even the people with tons of money, like, borrowing, like, $50 from them is a fucking issue. Or anytime, oh my God, anytime somebody passes away, it's like, people are here like, oh, that painting actually is mine. I just loaned it to him. Like, people are just clinging to possess. So, money aside, clinging to possessions is, they cling hard. Hard. They don't like losing possessions. I think everybody has like, so my grandfather was not an exception to that, but my whole family just kind of operates that way. Whereas, like, I feel like there's a lot of rich people in the U.S. who are like, of course, there's rich people who are cheap and stingy and shit, but there's a lot of rich people in the U.S. who maybe almost as a power trip love to show their largesse. I actually know people. I'm not gonna call anybody out, but I know people who love to express love, but also kind of express their dominant or their higher status by buying you a really nice meal and spending hundreds of dollars on it, and buying you really nice gifts. And that's their way of showing love. And maybe that's their way of sort of throwing their weight around and asserting maybe their success. So it's not fully just altruism. But at the same time, it's interesting that I had never consciously thought of this, but it's true that my family was not that brand of rich person. They were not out there throwing money around to show their largesse.
Yeah.
They were more likely to want to buy shit for themselves that then they could wear to show their status or whatever.
Yeah.
They wanted to make sure people knew that they were of a good family.
Yeah.
But they weren't going to be out here being generous necessarily with other people.
That's a really interesting distinction.
That is interesting.
That, like, there are these different ways to use your money to show off to other people that you're wealthy, and like one can be like just purely like, I'm buying myself nice shit that will make you see that I'm rich. In contrast to what you described, like, I'm gonna spend a shitload of money on you.
Yeah.
And so then you're gonna experience me as rich.
I have, like, I mean, in my fantasies of, whenever I indulge in fantasies of being fabulously wealthy, I don't think of handling wealth the way my family did. I think of, like, mobster movies where somebody pays for a car in cash by throwing literally like a softball of money, just of cash at the dealer.
Yeah.
And then the dealer being like, oh man, like the car's only worth this much. You gave me double. And then I'm being like, yeah, keep the rest. Good job. Which is like a very patronizing thing to do. But at the same time, it's like, I mean, you're patronizing somebody, but they're still getting nice money out of it. And I don't know, I think there's something more joyful to me about throwing money around like that. And I think it also feeds into I have people pleasing tendencies. I want to be liked. I wish I didn't want to be liked as much as I want to do, but I do have always wanted to be liked. And I'm working on wanting to be liked less now.
Yeah.
So to me, also part of like the joys of theoretically having a ton of money is like that you can just kind of make someone's day and then they'll remember, oh, that guy tips, and I like tipping well at restaurants and things like that. I would be embarrassed not to tip well. I would rather spend $5 on my meal and tip $15 because, well, maybe there's an element of, I think it probably falls under the people having disdain. But the one time, maybe one example in which a stranger's opinion of me would be painful is if it's like a service worker who, because I don't have much money, I'm not able to tip very well, and then I know people get pissed about that. But then I'm not just feeling pissed, but thinking of me as not someone who's just cheap or broke, but as somebody who is not willing to show appreciation for like a job done for me. So that's, I think that falls under 2/3 as well. But so okay, so there's an insight. A tangible one is that distinction and realizing that my family, I come from a family that's not just wealthy but stingy. And that there's no way that has not washed over me. And that they are stingy, I assume or I imagine, because they are also afraid of poverty. I can't tell you a moment in which somebody told me anything that awakened or that implanted this fear of poverty in me. But I am sure that's where I got it from. I mean, I would be shocked if it was from something else. And I know that they would be mortified of being seen or quote unquote found out as not having money. They definitely live in that script.
To be seen as not having money.
Yep. To this day, I know I have aunts and uncles who I know I've had conversations with recently where they would say things that remind me like, oh shit, like, yeah, you think about like people making judgments of you based on what car you drive, which is just something that I just don't consciously think about at all. I just, it's a kind of reminder, like, oh, I grew up in this.
Mm.
I grew up in this. I grew up with people who worried about this shit.
Mm.
So I can pretend like I'm above it,
Mm-hmm.
but I think, if I'm going to be honest,
Mm-hmm.
and as this map, can attest to, I am not. Maybe mental, maybe like on an intellectual level, I'm somewhat above it, but I did not at a feelings level.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So yeah, I mean, so you asked me insight surprising. Yeah, I mean, also as with a lot of work like this,
Mm-hmm.
I do have a sense of like pessimism of like, man, like these fears seem so entrenched
Yeah.
that I'm not sure I will ever be able to escape them.
Yeah.
But
Interesting.
at the same time, I've done therapy enough to know that like eventually you can change your perspective on things.
Yeah.
But it seems like looking at this map. I feel like I'm very far away from this fear not having a hold over me.
Mm.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
still a lot of time and labor that needs to be conducted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's fair. I think one, I hope I communicated it in the beginning, but like, if not, I'll say it now that in doing something like this, the intention is not to make these things go away,
Right. Yeah, and
but
you
that
did.
like,
You said
that like, maybe this was your experience, maybe it wasn't. It has been for other people at sometimes,
that.
not
Mm-hmm.
always, and it has been my experience when I've done it kind of for myself. But like, you have these things like a fear of poverty that you kind of day to day, you're like, damn, I wish I didn't have this. Like, this sucks, like limiting my life, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It's painful. But then you like explore it in this way, and you're like, oh, well, like, now I see why, like, it's part of this much bigger picture,
Yes.
and it's not like incomprehensible anymore,
Yes.
and it reduces the, um, like, it makes sense finally, and you're not just like, why the fuck am I like this? Like, I want it to go away. You're like, oh yeah, of course it's like that.
Right.
And that just kind of like provides a sense of ease,
Yeah.
or it can.
I think too, as well. It's not. I think I have to face the fact that these fears are not totally irrational, or maybe not even irrational at all, right?
Irrational.
Irrational,
Yeah.
right? Because that might be part of the battle too. Is like, I want to be rid of these fears.
Mm.
I want to not be clinging to money. I have a self concept of somebody that does not care as much about money, and I try to fancy myself that way. So this goes against that identity, right?
Mm.
But I think I have a feeling, I have like a suspicion that it's important for me to look at this mapped out now and understand that these fears are partially based on reality, that some people are going to think less of you for
Mm.
having less money,
Mm.
that when you don't have money, you do have less optionality. I
Mm.
think, maybe not, maybe
I
that's
mean,
not,
you have literally
but
experienced these things.
like, right, exactly. And so it's funny. It reminds me of a time that I was working through with my therapist. The fact that I tend to be very, very paranoid when I'm out on the street. I'm like thinking about getting mugged because
Mm.
I got mugged a handful of times when I was
Mm.
a teen, and I consider the place we live to be safe. I know
Mm.
a lot of people don't,
Mm.
but I consider it to be relatively safe. But I'm afraid of getting robbed and stuff, and sometimes that would, I don't know, like my my spouse would be like, why are you walking so fast? Like it would kind of sometimes get in the way of us just enjoying being outside. And I'm telling you all this because with my therapist, I think like I was like so frustrated that I was worried about, and I had this image of people in my life who were just seemed to be unbothered by it and didn't care. And then if someone was gonna try to mug me, I would beat the shit out of them anyway. And she sort of made me realize that like the goal isn't to get rid of the fear, because some amount of that fear is healthy and rational and keeps you safe. The goal was to calibrate it and be as realistic as possible about how at risk am I and not. And so the goal shifted from not having that fear to basically reminding myself that I can feel safe, that if I take certain precautions, I can feel safe enough to have fun, while still knowing that that there's a chance that one day I could get mugged or robbed, and that's gonna suck, but that it's not gonna, but that A, the chances are low, and B, that like it's also not the end of the world if that happens. So I think that this is striking me as a similar situation of like, it's good to map your fears and maybe even acknowledge that there is some sense of truth to them, and that running out of money would suck, and that I could end up in some of these situations. But maybe it's then about calibrating well of like, hey, like, what really are the chances that I will end up in a desperate situation like this or not? And I think at the crux of my frustration is that I know I'm taking less risk and being less playful than is justified, right? That I could take more risk and be more playful, and I wouldn't really be putting myself at that much risk of these worst case scenarios on the page, right? So I mean, obviously I have to kind of sit with this and let it work its thing in my psyche.
Yeah.
But I feel like I feel like what this is going to help with is, to the extent that it's going to quote unquote solve anything, I think that having laid a little bit more bare what exactly I'm afraid of will help me also recalibrate or be look at a little bit more realistically at, okay, this could happen, but what are the chances it would, and how can I minimize the chances of that happening when I take risks? And so maybe it's a version of like feeling safe enough with losing money to have fun and take risk. Because, I've figured out maybe a way to do it, or some sort of, whether it's system or coping mechanism or something that I can rely on if money ever gets bad. That I have things I can try out, or resources or steps I can take to try to minimize these bad effects. So just to spitball, the number. Okay.
Gotta wrap up, but
so I'll just finish. Like,
yeah.
so for example, I mean, to spitball, you could like the fear of people disdaining you. To me, that one's kind of easy because it's like anybody who would disdain me for not having money shouldn't be my friend anyway. And like in my late 30s, I feel like I can finally, I'm in a place where like that. Honestly, that shouldn't bother me, and I'm gonna try to stamp that fear out. But the powerlessness and the destitution, like, or not being able to participate fully, um, I think it would be irrational to not have a little bit of a healthy fear of that happening. Um, but maybe the task moving forward is to figure out how I can minimize, how I can, if those situations crop up, or if there's a threat of me being in those situations,
Mm-hmm.
what resources can I use to minimize, to lower the chances, or head that off,
Mm-hmm.
and knowing that it's not like that being in that situation would take long enough to get there, that I have plenty of chances to get off that path.
Mm-hmm.
That it's not that like one day I spent too much on a restaurant meal and the next day I'm working at this restaurant,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
So, or that I made a bad investment on a business venture, and so okay, I think that's a good. I know you gotta go, so I think
Yeah.
that's a good place to wrap this up.
Yeah.
And this was
That
a
was
lot
really
of
cool.
fun.
I
This
think,
was very
yeah.
powerful.
Thanks for doing this with me.
Of
One
course.
thing I think what I would leave on is I'm curious if you can just like imagine if none of these things bothered you anymore, right? It's like, okay, maybe you end up in a situation where you're working at the restaurant and people have power over you, or you have less money and people are disdaining you for it, or you're unable to participate with other people. Like, if you were able to experience any of these things and it just like didn't really bother you anymore, and you could just be okay, like, yeah, there's someone like lording over me, or like, yeah, people don't like me, or I can't do that thing with my friends, and you still are like okay with yourself and it doesn't weigh you down, like how your life might change, and like if you're not necessarily living your life guarding against those experiences anymore, like how much that opens up the possibilities in your life. That's just a sort of generalized question that I leave you with.
Oh, that's deep. I am so grateful that you left me with that question, because that is, yeah, there are assumptions under these fears, aren't there, of like that somehow it's less, a life where someone has power over you is less than a life where whatever you do your own thing. And certainly it strikes me as more fun to not have someone have power over me. But yeah, the possibility that maybe it's not a big deal.
Yeah, it's like
You know,
you could still be a human being with dignity, and somehow, like, it might not immediately be clear that that's possible, but like, if you weren't organizing your life in a way to avoid that stuff,
right?
What new possibilities would that allow for?
Oh, that's huge, man.
Yeah.
I'm going to marinate in that, because yeah, that's such a good point. Thank you for that.
Yeah.